Warning. This video contains spoilers for DC Universe's Doom Patrol. Viewer discretion is advised. DC Universe is out and I paid for a year of it. This is DC Discussion. Readers, episode 1 of the Titans spin-off Doom Patrol came out recently, and I watched it and I have some thoughts. Mostly good, some critiques, but at the same time I enjoyed myself. And while I didn't necessarily watch Titans after the first half of Young Justice Outsiders ended like I said it was going to, you don't necessarily need to in order to get into this from what I've seen. The episode does a great job establishing the characters, giving you a good idea on what they can do, and setting up the atmosphere and tone for the rest of the series. But don't worry, I will watch Titans eventually. But for now, let's talk about the pilot for Doom Patrol. So this story starts off with its fourth wall-breaking narrator in the form of the season's actual villain, Mr. Nobody. Which, I'm not gonna lie, it took me for quite a loop. Not the fact that Alan Tudyk is playing Nobody, that just makes all the sense. But it's the fact that the villain of the series is narrating the story of the heroes for the series. I've never heard of that being done before. Now off the bat it kind of makes sense because the first few scenes establishes his origin. He pays a small fortune to this Nazi after World War II to partake in a metahuman experiment that goes wrong? Right? Meh? It's kind of hard to tell at this point. And that's when we start getting a chunk of the heroes in this series, starting with Cliff Steele, played by Brendan Fraser, who I have missed tremendously. He was a famous race car driver in the 80s who was having some problems with his marriage. Alright, fine, he was cheating on his wife. It's implied that his wife knows about his affairs in the first established shots, despite Cliff constantly being one step ahead of her. But then we find out during a race that she's also cheating on him, and that both of them are pretty much the textbook definition of whack in this situation. One can argue that she may be a bit more whack because she revealed that info to Cliff mid-race knowing that he could possibly crash into another driver and end both his career and his life, but you know, tomato potato. Fast forward to the mid-90s where we find out that Cliff did crash and that he was being kept alive by this scientist named Niles through some shots that kind of reminded me of like the OG RoboCop movie, real talk. Unfortunately for Cliff, and similar to RoboCop, we find out that only his brain could be salvaged and that he's pretty much now a cyborg. He didn't take the news too well.
Oh my god. No. No, wait, what's that?
That's when we find out about the other two people who are in the manor outside of Cliff and Niles, Rita and Larry. Rita's dolled up in Golden Age film fashion while Larry's rocking the Invisible Man bandages. And rocking a bomb-ass fur-collared trench, bitch, I want that! Being assigned as caretaker during Cliff's rehabilitation, we find out Larry's origin story. He was a husband and a father that worked as a military pilot in the 60s, a pretty novel guy who had a lot of respect. Then one day when he was testing out a stratospheric rocket, he and his ship got hit with the same cosmic cloud that created the Fantastic Four. I know it's not the same fucking cloud, just go with the comparison. And crash landed back on base. When his army mates arrived at the crash site, they saw to their amazement that he was still alive, and holy crap did he have a shitty time. So after seeing Cliff and Larry's origin stories, the main thing I was thinking of was, man, both these origin stories are intense as fuck. So what does the show do to water down the intensity? Show us Rita's origin story, of course. Turns out the reason why she dresses like she's a Golden Age actress is because she was a Golden Age actress in the mid-50s. Wait, Rita and Larry's origins happened in the 50s and 60s? And this takes place in the mid-90s? But Rita hasn't aged a day and Larry is still moving and sounding like he did 30 years ago? Does Niles just have some type of anti-aging / immortality juice lying around the manor? How come you two haven't aged? Sorry, my continuity senses were tingling a bit. Let's move on. But yeah, she was an actress in the 50s and was filming on location in Africa for a movie, acting like she's never seen an amputee black man before. And while I was watching the scene, realizing that it did take place in the 50s, I was curious to know what exactly her trigger was. Was she caught off guard because she saw a black man behind the camera on that racism tip? Was she caught off guard because old dude was missing an arm and being an asshole about it?
¿Por qué no los dos?
Turns out she was caught off guard because he was an amputee, considering the majority of the film crew are black because they're in fucking Africa, and prepares for her next scene. So while she's underwater and struggling to get topside, this ghost snake goes inside of her mouth. Then when she does get topside, she finds out that she's become hideously deformed because karma is a bitch. So with that, we have 3 individuals that had shitty things happen to them, with the only one not being a scumbag is Larry with the trench coat that I want. Yet despite Larry being the better of the 3 morality-wise, I can't help but to feel sympathy for Cliff over the course of this episode. And that's mostly due to how much they focus on his overall struggle getting used to his robot body, while at the same time flashbacking to the happier moments in his life. Like remembering the precious moments he had with his daughter in order to walk in his new body. Or back when he and his wife weren't at such odds with each other and back when they were actually in love. Everything involving Cliff is just shot so well. And Brendan Fraser both post and pre-Robotman is emoted and resonates so well that he really stands out in this episode. You know, despite him being a scumbag. And that's when the episode decides to shift our perspective on Cliff. Because yes, it was a crash that did him in. But it wasn't on the racetrack. You see, he won that race despite what his wife told him while he was driving, and was feeling super shitty about everything that happened over the course of their marriage, I guess. So he calls her up while he's on the road, then leaves to pick her and his daughter up to try and reconcile and save his family. Then the car crash happens, with his entire family in the car. He didn't take the news very well. So then we fast forward to 2019, where Niles, Larry, and Rita still haven't aged at all. But that's fine! And it's revealed that Niles has a metahuman daughter named Crazy Jane, who has 64 split personalities, and they all have their own powers? Are you fucking serious? So while her introductory scene made me not necessarily want to look forward to seeing more of her in this season at all, especially after she talks the others into going on a joyride to Studio Backlot Town, USA, after Niles had to leave for business and telling them not to leave the fucking mansion. Everyone gets their moment to shine while they're appropriately being gawked at. Especially Larry, who we find out his life wasn't as perfect as his initial origin scene led on to believe. Yet, despite this reveal, while it is extra baggage, it doesn't necessarily put him in the asshole category that Rita and Cliff belong in. And to a certain extent, I would still count him as the heart and morality of the group. Why? Because it was the 60s. And the most common way to survive in the 60s being queer without becoming a pariah was living a lie. Rita, on the other hand, we find out that when she gets stressed or overly emotional, she starts pulling that Meltman shit. And we find out the overall result when it's pushed to her limit. So that's fun. Of course, Niles learns everything about their shenanigans when he arrives back in town. And instead of chastising his daughter, who was clearly the one responsible for all the shenanigans in the first place, he convinces the rest of the team to up and leave town, because ever since they revealed themselves to the town, they also revealed themselves to Mr. Nobody, and apparently he's coming. Cliff, on the other hand, decides to stay and defend the town. And while everybody else is driving away on the bus, Crazy Jane convinced everybody to turn around. That's when we get our first good look at Mr. Nobody's new form, and our reluctant heroes get a good look at what all he can do. I'm sure they'll be fine. So with this being my first exposure to Doom Patrol, I would have to say that this was pretty decent. Am I looking forward to the next episode? Yes. Do I want to keep watching the series? So far, so good. So yeah, I'll stick around for a couple more episodes. I'm definitely interested in seeing the role that Cyborg has to play in this, considering that he's not necessarily one of the original members of Doom Patrol. A prediction that I have is that after he's done with this season, he's just gonna go on to Titans or something like that. But yeah, considering how this one episode made me care so much about Cliff/Robotman, I'm anxious to see how the rest of the series has me like give a fuck about the rest of the cast. Cause I'm kinda almost there with Negative Man, real talk. And not because of his coat, despite that coat being fly as fuck, and I want it! So with that, readers, your homework assignment for the day. Write in the comments section below what you thought of episode 1 of Doom Patrol if you've seen it. I'm planning on doing more series like this later on down the line if I meet a specific stretch goal on my Patreon, so if you want to help financially support the channel, you can join it by clicking the card at the end of the video or in the link in the description down below, where you can also find a link to my merchandise store. Or if you want to give a one-time donation instead, you can find links to my PayPal and my Ko-fi page in the description box as well. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and every other Friday. But until then, this is Readus 101. Class dismissed.